Chapter 1. The Echo Before the Storm. There comes a moment, always, when silence becomes unbearable. Not the silence around you, but the silence within. That aching, invisible weight pressing down when you're alone. In the early morning haze when the world is still asleep, and there's nothing to distract you from the questions scratching at your soul. Is this all I was made for? That is not a casual question. It is a spiritual siren. A silent scream. And the moment you hear it, truly hear it, is the moment you begin to awaken. Not from sleep, but from sedation. The sedation of mediocrity. Of repetition. Of quiet resignation. You were not born to conform to the inertia of the masses. You were not etched into existence to play it safe, blend in, disappear beneath the tides of normal. There is something ancient in you. Something sacred. A fire not yet fed. A destiny not yet decoded. The architects of history felt that same whisper. Lincoln, raised in a log cabin with barely 2 years of formal schooling, looked into the emptiness of his beginnings and saw not a limit, but a launch pad. He heard the echo. Not the noise of the world telling him what he couldn't be, but the thunder of something greater calling from within. Rise. This first chapter, is not about motivation. It is about confrontation. Because before you can sculpt your life, you must demolish the illusion. The illusion that time is waiting. The illusion that clarity will come without struggle. The illusion that comfort is purpose in disguise. Comfort is the lullaby of the unawakened. And this life, your life, was not designed to be a slow drift toward regret. You must wake up now, not with your eyes, but with your will. The same way Edison lit the darkness not just with the filament, but with faith that refused to flicker through 1,000 failures. That kind of awakening doesn't come from external noise. It comes from silence. Deep, raw silence. Where the soul starts to roar. There is a mythology they've sold you. That you must have it all figured out before you move. That clarity precedes courage. But if that were true, the Wright brothers would never have launched themselves into the sky on wings stitched from madness and dream. Clarity didn't come first, conviction did. You decode your destiny not by predicting it, but by moving toward it blindly with your hands trembling and your heart on fire. You were made to create a story that future generations can point to and say, that's what it looks like when someone becomes fully alive. Not someone with perfect plans. Not someone with perfect timing. But someone who decided that now was no longer a place of waiting. Now was a battlefield. Now was the storm. Now was everything. This is the beginning of the end of your excuses. The end of deferring to fear. Because fear will never leave you. But neither will that inner voice, the one that whispers between your doubts, louder than the rest. There is more for you. And if you silence that voice, you don't just betray your future. You betray the world. Because there are people, millions you'll never meet, whose lives may be touched, even transformed, by the ripple effect of your courage. People whose chains will fall not because they knew you, but because you chose to rise. We are not meant to simply exist. We are meant to burn. Not with rage, but with resolve. Do you think Carnegie felt ready when he began working in a cotton factory at age 13? He didn't wait to feel prepared. He allowed necessity to become his mentor and made poverty his forge. Not because he wanted to suffer, but because he knew suffering could sculpt steel out of a human soul. You are not too early. You are not too late. You are exactly on time for the moment that will define you. But before we speak of belief, vision, or purpose, you must first face this moment for what it is. The confrontation with comfort. The tearing away of the veil that says you're fine. Because fine is the anesthesia of the lost. You are not meant to be fine. You are meant to be phenomenal. And that begins now. By rejecting the lie that who you've been must dictate who you'll become. The ashes of your past are not your prison. They are your power. When the rain fell on Disney's first failed studio, when bankruptcy echoed louder than dreams, he did not call it the end. He called it a beginning disguised as collapse. What the world saw as ruin, he saw as raw material. And that is how vision begins, not with sight, but with perception. You must learn to see through the fear, through the fog, through the frame the world has wrapped around your name. You don't need permission to begin. You need a decision. And this is that moment. Not in theory. Not in concept. In practice. In presence. In breath. Breathe it in. This fire is yours. You've been handed the ember. It was given to you the moment you were born into this chaotic, magnificent world with a heart too large to be caged by conformity. Your life is not a rehearsal. This is not the practice run. You are standing in the arena already. Can you feel it? The tension in your chest is not fear. It is the weight of potential asking to be used. Every second you hesitate is a second you hand to someone else's vision. And destiny does not bend to the undecided. So hear me now, hear yourself now. You are not your history. You are not your failures. You are not your job title, your GPA, your bank balance, or the whispers of those who never dared to try. You are not the scars. They are merely reminders that the healing was real. You are not your doubt. It is just the shadow that follows movement. You are and have always been a force. A force that has waited long enough. Waited behind hesitation. Waited behind politeness. Waited behind narratives too small to contain your truth. This world is not waiting for someone better. It is waiting for someone braver. And in this first step, this first breath, you are not becoming something new. You are returning to what you always were. The warrior that life tried to bury beneath expectation. The lion buried beneath the lamb. The storm disguised as stillness. This is chapter 1. And already the air is changing. Already your pulse is quickening. Already something inside is remembering its name. The question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you are willing. Willing to take the pain and make it prophecy. Willing to take the confusion and make it clarity. Willing to take the doubt and make it fuel. No one will do it for you. But everyone is waiting for you to do it. Not for applause, but for alignment. Because the moment you commit, fully, absolutely, irrevocably, the universe will respond. Not with ease, but with opportunity. Not with certainty, but with the tools you need to carve it out. This is not a gentle journey. This is war. War against the smallness that stole your birthright. War against every voice, every pattern, every weakness that told you to stay where it was safe. But safe is a prison with velvet walls. And you were born to break out. So let the chains fall. Let the fire rise. Let the storm come. This is not the beginning of a dream. This is the death of hesitation. This is the echo before the storm. The breath before the leap. The final silence before you become unignorable. Welcome to your awakening. Welcome to war. Welcome to you. Chapter 2. The mind is the forge. The battlefield of destiny is not out there. It is not in the economy, not in your circumstances, not in the hands of your critics or your competitors or even your friends or family. It is, and has always been, forged deep within the unseen territory of the human mind. And until that battlefield is mastered, until the wild chaos of your thoughts becomes aligned with your vision, everything else, no matter how well-planned or how well-funded or how well-intentioned, will collapse under the weight of its own inner contradiction. The mind is the forge, and every thought is a spark. Every belief is a hammer strike. Every conviction is molten steel waiting to be shaped into something that either imprisons you or liberates you. And if you do not master your thoughts will master you, not with violence, but with slow erosion. The erosion of ambition. The erosion of certainty. The erosion of the fire that once lived behind your eyes before the world convinced you to shrink. History has shown us, over and over, that brilliance is not born from pristine conditions or from a mind without fear. It is born from those who learn to channel the noise, who learn to mold their inner world until it burns hotter than anything around them. Think of Napoleon, sitting for hours alone with maps spread across candlelit tables, calculating not just the movements of men and armies, but the movements of empires, his mind ruthless and focused, turning the chaos of war into a kind of symphony. Think of Nikola Tesla, obsessed, consumed, often teetering on the edge of madness, but driven by a vision of the future so vivid, so undeniable, that he could barely sleep because his thoughts would not stop unfolding the blueprint of tomorrow. These were not men born into advantage. They were not loved by the world when they started. They were often ridiculed, feared, even abandoned. But they had one weapon more powerful than money, support, or luck. They had a mind that refused to betray them. And that is your first task in this chapter of your awakening. You must reclaim your mind. You must begin to train it, to harden it, to cleanse it of the narratives that were handed to you by accident, by weak men, by bitter women, by frightened voices who handed down their limitations as if they were truths. Because most people are not thinking, they are repeating. They are echoing the language of their past, the trauma of their childhoods, the fear of their peers, the doubt of their environments. They are not creating thought, they are absorbing it. But destiny cannot be decoded with borrowed logic. You must think for yourself, not react, not agree, not adopt, but actually create thought that originates from the deepest, clearest, most sovereign part of you. And that requires solitude, it requires discipline, and it requires an almost religious commitment to inner clarity. Let me be brutally honest, you will not build greatness by accident. You will not stumble into mental strength. You will not rise by simply avoiding failure or by being positive when it's easy. The human mind is a battleground, and the war is constant. Fear will always attempt to re-enter through the cracks. Doubt will disguise itself as logic. Comfort will dress up like peace. And if you are not vigilant, you will lose your edge, not overnight, but piece by piece. The decay is subtle. The surrender is gradual. But make no mistake, it is lethal. To reclaim the forge of your mind, you must start with what you allow to live there. You must interrogate your thoughts. You must stalk them like prey. Every time a belief arises that says, "I'm not ready, I don't have what it takes, I've failed too many times," you do not simply nod along. You confront it. You ask it where it came from, who taught it to you, and whether it has any business running the kingdom of your life. And if it cannot stand under the weight of truth, you burn it. Because your mind is not a storage unit for broken narratives. It is a weapon. And it must be sharp. You need to ask yourself, right now, what lives rent-free in your head that was never invited by your higher self? Is it the voice of a teacher who once told you that you weren't smart enough? Is it the silent judgment of your family, expecting you to stay small so they don't have to face their own limits? Is it the voice of society, screaming in 1,000 subtle ways that unless you fit a mold, you are not worthy? Identify it, name it, and begin the purge. Because until you do, you are building your future on a foundation of falsehoods. Let us be clear, mastery of the mind is not about suppressing emotion or pretending life doesn't hurt. It is about integrating pain into power. It is about being able to sit in the eye of the storm and still see the way forward. It is about choosing thought, not just reacting to stimulus. The strongest minds are not those that feel nothing. They are the ones that choose their focus, their meaning, their direction, regardless of circumstance. They are captains who steer their ship through fire, not passengers tossed by the wind. And here is the deeper truth. The world will not hold your hand as you do this work. In fact, it will fight you. The moment you begin to take control of your thoughts, to become intentional, to refuse the lies that once dictated your identity, the world around you will notice. Some will be threatened. Some will mock. Some will say you've changed, as if that were a crime. But let them. You are not changing for applause. You are changing for alignment. You are rewiring your destiny at the neurological level. That is not cute. That is revolutionary. So what does it actually look like to forge your mind into a weapon worthy of your destiny? It looks like getting up early, not to impress anyone, but to reclaim silence before the noise of the world invades your thoughts. It looks like journaling, not as a trend, but as a surgical tool to remove false beliefs. It looks like reading what challenges you, listening to those who stretch you, consuming information that expands your mental architecture instead of numbing it. It looks like fasting from negativity, not just in food, but in media, in conversation, in the toxic familiarity of shallow people with shallow thoughts. And most of all, it looks like consistency. Because anyone can be focused for a day. But the mind is not mastered in a single decision. It is shaped through repetition, through effort, through failure. Yes, failure, not as an enemy, but as the forge itself. Every time you fall and rise again, your mind learns to follow your command. Every time you feel like quitting but continue anyway, your brain rewires its concept of limits. That is the truth behind greatness. It is not gifted, it is programmed. It is engineered. It is built. Ford failed multiple times before he changed the course of industry. Jobs was fired from his own company before he returned with a vision so bold it reshaped the world. These men didn't rise because the world allowed them to. They rose because they commanded their thoughts with such precision, such intensity, that the world had no choice but to follow. You are no different. Your brain is not broken. Your intelligence is not fixed. Your potential is not defined by a test score or a job title. You are sitting on a forge. You've just never been taught how to use it. But now you know. And now that you know, there are no more excuses. This is the path. This is the beginning of mental sovereignty. From here, we do not think like victims. Chapter 3: The Immovable Belief. There is a moment that separates those who simply exist from those who shape the future, and it does not come wrapped in thunder or spotlight. It arrives silently, often in the solitude of struggle, in the quiet space where no one is watching and the applause is absent. And in that moment, a question rises that will define everything that follows. What do you believe about yourself, about your place in the world, about what is truly possible? Not what do you say you believe when asked. Not what you post about or casually mention in conversations. But what you actually believe when the pressure builds, when the money runs low, when the motivation fades and you are left alone with nothing but your own thoughts and the void of uncertainty. Because that belief, that inner unshakable conviction, is the axis upon which the entire wheel of your destiny turns. Belief is not a luxury. It is not a soft virtue. It is the first brick in the foundation of any world-changing life. And if it wavers, everything else becomes theater. Your strategies, your goals, your ambition, they all crumble under the weight of invisible internal conflict. No architect begins a tower without believing the ground beneath it can bear the weight. No warrior charges into battle if he doubts his own sword. You cannot move mountains externally if you've allowed termites of self-doubt to hollow you from within. Look at the ones who reshaped human progress. They weren't always the most gifted, or the best connected, or even the most prepared. But they carried inside them a belief so fierce it became its own gravity. Thomas Edison didn't just believe in electricity, he believed in himself in the face of failure that would have broken lesser men. 10,000 failed experiments were not a deterrent. They were confirmation that his belief was real, because only belief that deep survives that many defeats. Oprah Winfrey, born into poverty, abused, rejected, and ridiculed, built an empire not because the world made room for her, but because she created a world that matched what she saw when she closed her eyes. That is belief, not hope, not fantasy, but vision aligned with will, strengthened by repetition, and rooted in unshakable self-respect. And yet most people are walking around with borrowed beliefs, beliefs implanted by accident, reinforced by trauma, passed down by generations who never questioned why they settled, why they stopped, why they gave up. These inherited beliefs come dressed as humility, I don't need much. They masquerade as practicality, that's just how things are. But make no mistake, these are not virtues. These are hand-me-down shackles. And if you do not identify and replace them, they will govern every decision you make until the day you die, and you'll call it fate when it was actually submission. To decode your destiny, you must declare war on every belief that does not serve the higher vision of who you were born to become. That means going back, way back, to find the first moment you believed something false. Maybe it was the teacher who told you that you'd never be more than average. Maybe it was the parent who modeled fear instead of faith. Maybe it was the failure that wounded you so deeply you quietly vowed never to risk that much again. Whatever it was, you need to drag it out of the shadows. You need to confront it. Because you cannot build a kingdom on a foundation that was laid in shame. This is not about arrogance. It's about alignment. It's about telling the truth, not the loud truth the world wants to hear, but the deep, internal, non-negotiable truth that lives beneath all performance. And the truth is this: you are more than what you have been conditioned to believe. Your capacity is not capped by your education, your origin, your job title, or even your past. Your potential is not a fixed number, but a sleeping volcano waiting for the right combination of belief and action to erupt into form. And the world doesn't need another hesitant echo. It needs a voice forged in certainty. So how do you create that certainty? How do you forge belief into something unshakable? You start by making a decision that your identity is not open to negotiation. Not anymore. You stop seeking validation for who you are and begin acting as if your belief has already been written in stone. You don't fake it, you forge it. You build it, brick by brick, with every daily act of alignment. You speak your vision aloud, not because you need others to approve it, but because you need to hear yourself declare it into existence. You show up every single day, whether the conditions are favorable or not, and each time you follow through on a commitment, you cast another vote for the version of yourself that is unstoppable. And yes, you will be tested. Belief is not proven in calm seas. It is proven in fire. When everything begins to fall apart, when the delays stretch into months, when the critics speak louder than the support, when you're tempted to abandon the dream because the path is darker than you imagined, that is when belief is either exposed as counterfeit or revealed as truth. And if you have done the work, if you have taken your vision and branded it into your mind and your habits and your rituals, then nothing outside of you can break what lives inside of you. Belief is not a passive state. It is a constant act of creation. You sculpt it through repetition. You fuel it through gratitude. You protect it through focus. You strengthen it through suffering. And once it is established, deeply, completely, irrevocably, it becomes the root from which all other power grows. Your clarity, your purpose, your action, your adaptability, your resilience, all of it is built on the backbone of belief. And here's what no one tells you: belief is contagious. Not in the motivational sense, but in the spiritual sense. When you are fully aligned with a vision and a belief so authentic it reverberates through your words and your actions and your presence, people feel it. They don't even need to understand it. They feel it on a level deeper than intellect. They trust you because you trust yourself. They follow because they sense you are not wandering, you are building. And that belief, that fire, spreads, not through manipulation, but through magnetism. Look back at every great movement, every revolution, every paradigm shift in art, in science, in culture, and you will find at the center of it a person who believed before it was reasonable. Martin Luther King Jr. stood in front of a nation drowning in injustice and declared a dream that had not yet been seen. Elon Musk invested everything in ideas that the world laughed at until they worked. Rosa Parks didn't just sit on a bus. She stood on the foundation of belief that said, "I am not less than." These are not mythical beings. These are humans who learned to see themselves not through the lens of limitation, but through the lens of what could be possible if belief became their law. And that is your task now. To take what is only a faint image in your imagination and make it your internal truth. To believe not because you've been given permission, not because you have evidence, but because you have decided. Because decision is the birthplace of belief. And belief is the birthplace of power. So let today be the day you set fire to every borrowed opinion about who you are. Chapter 4. The Clarity Beyond the Chaos. Clarity is not a gift that descends softly upon the fortunate few in moments of stillness and serenity. Rather, it is a discipline forged in the midst of swirling contradictions, conflicting priorities, and the deafening noise of a world that profits from your distraction. And if you wait for perfect calm before deciding who you are and where you are going, you will surrender your life to the calendar of other people's urgencies, because the planet will never cease spinning, the news feed will never stop updating, and the storms of circumstance will never politely pause so you can gather your thoughts in peace. True clarity, the kind that cuts through confusion like a blade through fog, is born when you stand unwavering at the epicenter of chaos and refuse to be moved by anything less than truth. It arrives the moment you decide that no matter how many notifications ping, how many voices clamor for your allegiance, how many fires flare up on the periphery, you will hold the line around the one central question that matters. What is the undeniable mission that animates your soul and justifies your breath? Consider how history's pathfinders operated not in sanitized laboratories of certainty but in messy, unpredictable crucibles where clarity had to be forced into existence. Think of Florence Nightingale navigating blood-soaked Crimean war hospitals, sketching revolutionary plans for modern nursing amid screams and infection. Or think of Winston Churchill, chain-smoking in war rooms thick with tension, dictating speeches that would brace a nation while bombs rattled the windows overhead. They did not pause and ask the universe for quiet. They generated focus from within and bent pandemonium to their will, proving that clarity is not the absence of turbulence but the mastery of direction inside it. For you, the practice begins by distinguishing signal from noise, and that is a ruthless exercise, because most distractions do not parade as adversaries. They masquerade as opportunities, invitations, obligations, even pseudo-emergencies dressed in urgency's uniform. The email marked important, the meeting that could have been a memo, the social media scroll disguised as research. Each one steals a sliver of cognitive bandwidth, and if you are not vigilant, those slivers become slices and those slices become your life. The disciplined mind performs triage. It asks, does this input advance my primary mission or dilute it? And if the answer is dilution, the disciplined mind amputates without apology, for vision is a finite resource and must never be squandered on the trivial. Yet clarity is deeper than minimalism or time management. It is about structural alignment between values, vision, and daily execution. Begin by interrogating your values until they are distilled to a hierarchy so clear you could etch it on a single sheet of paper and hand it to a stranger who, reading it, would know instantly what you stand for, what you will fight for, and what you would rather lose than compromise. Then examine whether the architecture of your life, calendar, environment, relationships, financial habits, mirrors that hierarchy. If it does not, you are living a contradiction, and contradictions breed chaos. The misaligned entrepreneur who claims family is paramount yet consistently sacrifices family time on the altar of perpetual hustle will experience burnout not because ambition is wrong but because the price is incongruent with proclaimed priorities. Only when your external structure echoes your internal order does calm emerge amid frenetic motion. To maintain this order, you must cultivate rituals that anchor consciousness. The morning review in which you reaffirm the long horizon before the day's turbulence begins, the midday recalibration when you audit whether actions remain tethered to intention, the evening debrief where victories are acknowledged, lessons extracted, and mental clutter purged so that sleep restores rather than merely sedates. These rituals are non-negotiable fire breaks. They keep the wildfire of busyness from consuming the forest of purpose. Equally vital is strategic solitude. Not the escapist withdrawal of exhaustion, but the intentional stepping away to recalibrate perception. Just as a sculptor steps back from the marble to see the emerging figure with fresh eyes, you must routinely exit the frame of your obligations to survey the whole canvas of your life, schedule thinking time as firmly as revenue-generating tasks, and defend it with the same ferocity. For if you cannot hear your own thoughts above the crowd, your destiny will echo the crowd's mediocrity. Understand, too, that clarity is iterative. It refines through action and refines again through reflection. You draft a plan, you execute, you collide with reality, you revise. This cycle is not evidence of confusion but proof of growth. Edison adjusted filament after filament not because the goal shifted but because each experiment illuminated the next optimal move. Perfectionists wait for clairvoyance. Leaders prototype their way to precision. Guard against the temptation to equate clarity with ease. The sharpest path is often the steepest, for when you know exactly what must be done, ambiguity can no longer serve as a shield, procrastination becomes personal betrayal, and excuses shrivel in the spotlight of self-awareness. Clarity comes hand in hand with accountability, the sober acknowledgement that if destiny remains dormant now, it is no longer due to confusion but to choice. Finally, recognize that clarity expands capacity. When your vision focuses like a laser, energy that once leaked into doubt now concentrates into acceleration. Tasks that felt Herculean shrink to size because mental friction has been removed. This is why organizations with a unifying mission outperform those with bloated manuals, and why individuals who know their why outlast equally talented peers who wander. Direction compounds. Therefore, let the noise rage on the periphery. Let markets fluctuate, opinions oscillate, and crises erupt. They will, they always do. Build within yourself an unwavering axis of certainty, maintained through deliberate design, disciplined habits, and relentless review. Stand at that axis each morning and declare, "No storm will decide my coordinates. No uproar will rewrite my mission." Then step into the whirlwind, not as a leaf to be blown but as the architect of momentum, carving straight lines through swirling air because you carry, inside your chest, the compass that chaos cannot corrupt and the map that confusion cannot erase. Chapter 5. The Vision That Rewrites Reality. Vision is not a luxury reserved for philosophers, inventors, or those with time to sit and dream. It is the very engine of human evolution, the invisible architecture upon which every meaningful transformation has been built, and without it, we revert to instinct, to cycles, to mediocrity disguised as routine. It is not simply about setting goals or imagining a better future. Those are fragments. Vision is the full internal film, playing in vivid detail, of a world that does not yet exist but could, if only someone were bold enough, stubborn enough, and disciplined enough to make it real. You do not stumble upon vision like a lucky coin on the ground. You craft it. You distill it from within yourself, often through friction and frustration, through anger at what is and obsession with what must become. Vision is the child of both imagination and discontent. It comes to those who are no longer willing to tolerate the default, who refuse to accept that the current system, the current structure, the current self is the final version. It is, quite literally, the seed of rebellion against entropy. And if you have ever felt that gnawing sense that you were born for more, that something deeper is calling you toward a higher dimension of life, it is because the raw materials of vision are already alive inside you. They simply haven't been assembled with clarity and force. Walt Disney was not simply a man with dreams of cartoons. He saw cities before they were built, theme parks before the engineering existed to support them, entire ecosystems of experience and story before the public even knew what they wanted. That is what real visionaries do. They walk ahead of the timeline, and because no one can see what they see, they are mocked, misunderstood, or dismissed, until suddenly the world catches up and calls them genius. But genius is not magic. Genius is relentless inner vision held with such intensity that it pulls reality toward itself, bending probability until the unlikely becomes the inevitable. But you must understand, vision without structure is hallucination. It's not enough to see something better. You must begin to translate the unseen into action, break it down into pieces, reverse engineer the result, and then begin constructing, brick by brick, in the material world. Vision is not daydreaming. It is design. You are an architect, not of buildings but of outcomes. And every great architect knows that form follows function, and function follows purpose. That means your vision must be anchored to something more than ego or aesthetics or applause. It must be connected to something higher, something enduring, something that cannot be destroyed when the applause fades or when setbacks arrive, because they will arrive. Do not look for the world to affirm your vision in its infancy. The early stages of vision feel lonely because clarity isolates. When you are the only one who sees what must be built, the crowd will try to pull you back, not always with malice, but with ignorance and fear. They don't know what you see. They can't. It's not their fault. But it is not their responsibility either. Yours is the burden of belief. Yours is the duty to hold the image in your mind when nothing in the external world has caught up to it yet. This is why vision is not for the faint-hearted. It demands energy, precision, emotional resilience. You will doubt yourself. You will feel the fatigue of carrying an idea that no one else seems to understand. You will want to quit, not because you don't care, but because you care so deeply and the gap between your imagination and your current capacity feels overwhelming. But that discomfort is sacred. It is the friction of expansion, the growing pain of becoming a vessel large enough to contain the thing you are building. You are not just executing a task. You are becoming the person who is capable of living the life you have seen. And make no mistake, vision expands or shrinks in proportion to the quality of your input. You must protect it. You must feed it. You must surround it with environments and people and ideas that oxygenate it, not suffocate it. If you share it with those who are still worshiping certainty and comfort, they will smother it with their fears. So stop expecting support from those who are still asleep inside their own lives. Seek instead those who are actively building their own visions, not perfectly, but with integrity, and you will find kindred spirits who know the sacred burden of carrying light into darkness. At some point, you must also put the vision on paper. Externalize it. Make it visible. Make it tactical. Not because writing it down will magically manifest it, but because the very act of articulation forces refinement. It forces you to go from vague hope to defined outcome. Ask yourself the hard questions. What exactly am I building? Who will it serve? What will it cost? How will it evolve? Where will I begin? The more precisely you can answer these, the stronger your internal GPS becomes, and once that directional clarity is embedded in your system, your days stop being random. You wake up with fire. You organize your priorities around the long game. You stop wasting energy trying to prove things to people who do not matter. You let go of temporary pleasures because they no longer seduce you, not because you're avoiding fun, but because you're building something so much more satisfying, something that outlasts indulgence and stretches into legacy. Because vision, once it matures, becomes generational. It stops being about your name and starts being about your impact. It's the business that outlives your body, the book that survives your breath, the movement that keeps growing long after you are gone. The legacy is not the product of luck or status. It is the natural result of someone who had the courage to imagine something massive, and the character to pursue it when it was invisible to everyone else. So, ask yourself now, without self-editing, without fear of judgment, what do you really see when you close your eyes and look 10 years ahead? Who are you when you strip away the limits? What does the life you were meant to live actually look like? Not the life you were told to want. Not the life that earns approval. The one that makes your lungs expand and your spine straighten and your heart beat with conviction. That vision is not random. It is your soul remembering. It is your future calling you forward. And your only job, the real job, is to answer the call. Build it. Shape it. Define it. Then protect it from doubt and decorate it with action. Because a vision, once fully claimed, becomes more than a dream. It becomes a command. One that no longer asks if only how soon. Chapter 6. Purpose is a weapon. Purpose is not a sentimental concept to be quoted in passing during moments of calm reflection. It is a force, a weapon, a compass forged not in comfort but in confrontation, and those who misunderstand it as a luxury for the privileged or the poetic will drift through life chasing applause, achievements, or approval without ever touching the fire that makes existence feel necessary. Purpose is not the answer to the question, what do I want? It is the deeper, more dangerous answer to, what am I willing to suffer for, sacrifice for, and build through, even if the applause never comes? Most people never discover their purpose because they confuse it with pleasure or passion, two fleeting states of emotional stimulation that fluctuate with mood and convenience. But purpose is made of harder material. It's forged in the collision between your natural gifts, your deepest wounds, and the needs of the world. It is revealed through doing, not waiting. It emerges not in the avoidance of pain but in the direct engagement with the problems you were uniquely designed to solve. It is a task that feels holy, even if it is hidden. It is a path that you cannot fully explain to others, but cannot ignore either. And when you find it, when it finds you, it does not whisper. It roars. Purpose has no patience for hesitation. It demands movement. It rewires your nervous system so that procrastination feels like poison and alignment becomes the only tolerable state of existence. When you are living without purpose, even luxury feels empty, and when you are living with purpose, even hardship feels meaningful. That is how you know it's real. It gives context to suffering, not escape from it. It transforms discomfort into fuel. It grants you the strength to endure what others flee from. It gives your story direction, your scars meaning, and your silence a voice. Look at the lives of those who shifted the course of history. They were not driven by shallow metrics of success. They were animated by purpose so consuming that it overrode fatigue, rejection, ridicule, even danger. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years behind prison bars not because it was part of some career strategy, but because his mission, the dismantling of apartheid, was not optional. It was woven into his very identity. It was not a belief. It was a duty. That's what purpose does. It transforms an individual from a seeker into a servant of something greater, something enduring, something that does not require applause because its worth is self-evident. You will know you've stepped into your purpose the moment your life begins to cost you, not in a destructive way, but in the same way that building anything of value costs time, energy, attention, and persistence. Purpose does not always feel good. It's not always exhilarating. In fact, many days, it feels like resistance, the type of resistance that sharpens the blade rather than breaks it. But even in those moments, you are clear. You are not wandering. You are not dabbling. You are constructing something that echoes beyond your lifetime. And yet, too many people postpone their search for purpose under the illusion that they must first reach a place of perfection before they are qualified to contribute. They think they need more education, more clarity, more money, more time, and so they wait. They wait for some grand revelation or permission from the universe. But purpose does not reveal itself through endless contemplation. It reveals itself in motion. You learn who you are by doing, by building, by engaging, by failing and recalibrating. You do not find purpose by avoiding life. You find it by stepping fully into it. Purpose doesn't hide. It waits. It waits behind the things you've been avoiding. It waits beneath the fear you haven't faced, behind the excuses you've allowed to calcify into routine. It waits in the things that keep you up at night, the injustices that ignite something primal inside you, the patterns that repeat because you've been called to break them, not for yourself alone, but for others who don't yet know they're watching you for permission to do the same. When you understand this, everything changes. Work stops being work. It becomes contribution. Time stops being an enemy. It becomes sacred. Even pain transforms, no longer a punishment, but a teacher. You stop chasing motivation because now you're moved by something stronger, meaning. And in a world addicted to distraction, a human being with meaning is a revolutionary force. They cannot be manipulated, cannot be pacified, cannot be sold false priorities. They are locked in not to a plan, but to a principle. And that kind of person becomes unstoppable. But be warned, once you declare your purpose, the world will test your resolve. You will be tempted to compromise, to dilute, to seek comfort over clarity. That's when you must remember, purpose is not comfort. It is calling. And calling always demands cost. The difference between those who build legacies and those who are forgotten is simple. The former stayed loyal to their purpose even when it stopped being exciting. They showed up on the days it didn't feel magical. They honored the mission on days when no one clapped. That's what builds trust in yourself. That's what creates self-respect. Not how loud you start, but how consistently you show up when no one is watching. And no, you don't need the whole plan figured out to start living on purpose. You only need to know the next step that aligns with your highest truth. Then you take it. And then the next. The path doesn't appear until you begin walking. The fog doesn't lift until you commit. That's the deal. That's the price. That's the paradox. You want certainty, but purpose requires faith. Not blind faith, earned faith, built through action, discipline, courage, and self-awareness. Your purpose is your weapon, the blade that cuts through noise, through doubt, through fear. But like any blade, it must be forged, and that takes heat, pressure, and time. So do not fear the friction. Do not wait for clarity to come before you move. Decide now that your life will be used, fully, completely, and without apology, in service of something that transcends you. Something that would still matter even if no one ever said your name. Because in the end, the greatest fulfillment is not in achieving status. It's in knowing that your existence mattered, not because of how much you gained, but because of how deeply you gave, how honestly you lived, and how fiercely you answered the calling that refused to leave you alone. Chapter 7. The discipline that separates the few. Discipline is not a punishment. It is not a restriction. It is not a system designed to rob you of spontaneity or pleasure. Discipline is freedom, earned, not granted. It is the foundation upon which self-respect is built, the silent architect of every form of mastery, and the quiet truth behind those who separate themselves from the crowd, not with noise or spectacle, but through a level of consistency that makes average men uncomfortable. Those who misunderstand discipline see it as suffering, Those who embody it understand it as structure, the chosen, deliberate structure that replaces chaos with progress and illusion with results. In a world obsessed with shortcuts, discipline is the long road that ultimately becomes the fastest. While others seek hacks and more hacks, those who are truly committed are not looking for ways around the work, they are looking for ways deeper into it. They are not seduced by convenience or delayed by moods. They know that the days when they feel least motivated are the days that matter most, because anyone can perform when it's easy. Anyone can work when inspiration hits. But discipline is what you build when you keep going after the motivation is gone, when your body is tired, your mind is scattered, and the world is offering you every excuse to slow down or turn around. Discipline is about sovereignty. It's the act of reclaiming control over your time, your attention, your impulses. And in a society engineered to keep you reactive, to keep you scrolling, consuming, comparing, overextending, choosing discipline is an act of rebellion. It is saying, I will not be ruled by algorithms, temptations, or the untrained opinions of those who have not earned my attention. It is putting the phone down, showing up when no one is watching, going to bed when others are numbing out, rising early when there's nothing urgent calling, because you know that the future you want doesn't respond to intention, it responds to structure. It is not enough to want it. Everyone wants something. Everyone has dreams and desires and goals they can describe in vivid language. The difference lies not in what people say they want, but in how they behave on the days they don't feel like it. Discipline is the contract you sign with your future, and the way you pay for it is through your actions today, tomorrow, and every day after that. It's showing up to the gym when your energy is low, studying when you'd rather be entertained, practicing when it would be easier to scroll, saying no when everything in you is screaming, just this once. The ones who become elite are not those who always feel good. They are those who refuse to negotiate with laziness. They are not fueled by dopamine. They are fueled by a decision to become someone that average people would not recognize in the mirror. And that decision is renewed every day through repetition. That's what discipline really is, identity reinforced by routine. You become the person who writes by writing. You become the person who leads by leading. You become the person who builds, trains, speaks, wins, not by declaring it, but by proving it to yourself over and over and over until there is no part of you that doubts it anymore. And here's the brutal truth most avoid. If you do not build discipline intentionally, you will still develop it, but it will be trained by default, shaped by weakness, inconsistency, and avoidance. And instead of a life designed around your highest potential, you will live in a life shaped by your lowest habits. Every day, you are training yourself. Every decision is a vote for the person you are becoming or the version of yourself you should have buried long ago. There is no neutral. Every morning that begins with distraction instead of discipline, every evening that ends in regret instead of satisfaction, every time you let yourself off the hook when you promise to stay on it, that is the slow erosion of your edge. Look around you. Most people live without edge. They live flat lives, padded by comfort, protected by soft routines, afraid to step into environments that require precision. But you were not born for that. You were born to build, to create, to command. And those things require edge. Edge is not about aggression. It is about sharpness, clarity, control. Edge is what keeps the professional distinct from the amateur, the warrior from the wanderer. Edge is earned, and discipline is how it's kept. Study anyone who has reached the top of their craft, athlete, entrepreneur, artist, general, inventor, and beneath the headlines, beyond the gifts, behind the talent, you will find the same pattern. Routine. Not glamorous. Not easy. Not always exciting. But executed with obsessive consistency. Kobe Bryant's workouts before sunrise. Marcus Aurelius journaling through his trials. Benjamin Franklin tracking his virtues with pen and ink every single day. Jocko Willink's 4:30 a.m. wake-ups. This is not about trends. It's about trusting the boring work. Because the boring work, when done relentlessly, becomes greatness disguised in discipline. And don't mistake this for grind culture or hustle addiction. Discipline is not about running yourself into the ground. It's about rising into your power. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing the right things every day, even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. That's the filter. That's the crucible. When it's pouring rain outside and you still run. When no one's watching your effort and you still give 100%. When no one is clapping and you still execute with pride. That's discipline. Because you know who you're becoming. And you know that when others break under pressure, you won't. Because you've been training for the day when most will fold. You've already bled in the gym. You've already failed on purpose. You've already done the reps when it hurt because when the moment comes, you don't want to wonder whether you're ready, you want to know. And eventually, this becomes your identity. Not just something you do, but who you are. The type of person who keeps promises. The type who shows up no matter what. The type who others can count on. Not because you're flawless, but because you are fortified. Discipline gives you that. Discipline builds the core that pressure cannot shake. It is your inner steel, forged in fire. So the next time the temptation to quit, delay, or escape arises, remember, that's the test. And how you answer it determines everything. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be unwilling to stop. Because the difference between a life that is remembered and one that is regretted is not talent, luck, or charisma. It is discipline. Quiet. Relentless. Uncompromising. And absolutely under your control. Chapter 8. The action that unlocks destiny. There is a dangerous myth that has taken root in the minds of modern people. The idea that thoughts alone are enough, that belief alone will build, that visualizing, manifesting, or simply feeling passionate is sufficient to bring about change in the material world. This illusion is comfortable, seductive, and profoundly destructive, because it confuses potential with power, and the truth is, potential is irrelevant until it is converted, and that conversion only happens through action. Not dreams. Not declarations. Not desire. Action is the great translator of vision into reality. Without it, your ideas die in silence, no matter how beautiful, no matter how revolutionary they sound in your mind. The difference between those who rise and those who remain stuck is not intelligence or creativity or even opportunity, it is their relationship to execution. Those who win are not always those with the best ideas, but those who move first, move consistently, and move with intention even when the outcome is uncertain. Because in the end, it's not the man with the clearest mind who wins, it's the one who dares to move when others are still overthinking, still waiting for clarity, still tweaking and preparing and doubting and stalling. Every single achievement that ever mattered began as an act. Not a plan. Not a meeting. Not a brainstorm. A decision to move, even when the odds were imperfect. When the Wright brothers decided to build a machine that could fly, they didn't wait for university credentials, funding, or public support. They started building in a bicycle shop with scraps. When Rosa Parks refused to move from her seat, she didn't wait for permission, she became the permission. When Jeff Bezos started Amazon in a garage, it wasn't the size of the idea that mattered, it was the act of starting. This is the pattern. It repeats endlessly. Every great movement begins with someone who stops waiting for the conditions to be perfect. Action, at its highest level, is not random movement. It's not checking boxes or staying busy to feel productive. True action is aligned movement, action rooted in clarity, driven by purpose, sustained by discipline, and directed toward a specific outcome. This kind of action is rare because it requires full internal integration. It means you are no longer moving to impress or to escape. You are moving because not acting would be a betrayal of the person you are becoming. And when you reach that state, something changes. Time starts bending. Momentum builds. Life begins to respond, because the universe reacts not to your thoughts but to your commitment, and commitment is always revealed through behavior. So if you are stuck, stagnant, overwhelmed by the weight of everything you want to do, stop thinking about the entire staircase and start with the next concrete step you can take. Clarity is not a prerequisite for movement. It is often the result of it. You don't need to know the whole path to begin. You just need to break inertia. Because inertia is the enemy, not failure, not risk, not rejection, inertia. The longer you wait to act, the heavier the moment becomes, the more your mind fills with reasons to wait a little longer, the more your confidence erodes in the silence between thought and motion. But the second you act, even in a small, imperfect way, something internal shifts. The fog lifts, not all at once, but enough for you to see what the next move could be. And that next move becomes the gateway to a sequence. Because action has a rhythm. It creates data. It gives feedback. It refines direction. It opens doors you could never have predicted from the sidelines. But you'll never see those doors from the bleachers. You have to be on the field, bruised and breathing hard, covered in the dust of effort. That is where the breakthroughs happen. Not in the whiteboard session, but in the trenches. Not in the planning phase, but in the doing. The problem is that we have been taught to fear doing. We are so afraid of looking foolish, of being judged, of failing publicly, that we prefer to stay in theory where it feels safe. But theory never changed the world. Action did. Theory never built a business. Theory never wrote a book. Theory never healed a relationship. Action did. And yes, action invites risk. But that risk is the price of entry to a life that is fully lived. If you are unwilling to act before you feel ready, you are choosing a life of watching other people build what you were capable of creating. You must rewire your psychology so that action becomes your default, not your exception. Waiting must start to feel wrong. Procrastination must feel like poison in your bloodstream. You have to train yourself to associate movement with freedom, not fear. That means designing your environment so that action is easy and hesitation is hard. Remove friction. Add clarity. Set deadlines. Create pressure if needed. Do not leave your behavior to willpower. Design your systems so that movement becomes the inevitable result of your identity. Action is also how you build confidence. Confidence is not the prerequisite for action. It is the consequence. The more you act, the more evidence you accumulate that you are capable. And capability, once proven through experience, silences self-doubt. So if you feel uncertain, the solution is not to wait, it's to move. Prove yourself to yourself. Stack the evidence. Let the scoreboard of your actions speak louder than the opinions of others or the whispers of your own doubt. And remember this, most people won't understand why you're moving so quickly, why you're launching before you're ready, why you're waking up early, staying late, making calls, building things, sending messages, showing up relentlessly. They won't understand because they've never lived in the state of committed action. They've lived in delay, in hesitation, in theory. But you are different now. You understand that movement is life. Stagnation is death. And every day you choose to act is a day you compound your power. This chapter is not a recommendation. It's a call to arms. You don't need another strategy. You don't need more research. You don't need to meditate on whether the timing is right. The time is now. It has always been now. Every moment you've been waiting for permission was a lie. You are the permission. So move. Send the message. Launch the project. Make the call. Start the process. Face the thing. Write the page. Have the conversation. Build the prototype. Post the work. Do it now. Imperfectly. Relentlessly. Consistently. That's how it happens. That's how it begins. That's how destiny is unlocked, not through dreaming, but through doing. Chapter 9. The Power of Adaptability. Adaptability is not weakness. It is not a compromise, not a dilution of vision or a betrayal of standards. Adaptability is strength refined by wisdom. It is the recognition that survival alone is not the goal, but evolution, and evolution demands that you remain flexible without losing your core, responsive without being reactive, and willing to change without losing sight of the purpose that drives you. In nature, it is not the most intelligent species that survives, nor the strongest. It is the one most responsive to change. That same principle applies to individuals, to entrepreneurs, to leaders, to artists, to warriors of any kind. If you cannot adapt, you become obsolete, and if you cannot shift with the landscape while staying anchored in your mission, the very thing you built will eventually collapse under the weight of your refusal to evolve. We live in a time of rapid change, where entire industries can disappear within years, where the skills of yesterday can become irrelevant tomorrow, where the methods that got you here will absolutely not get you any farther unless they are reviewed, refined, or replaced. The game changes constantly, economically, technologically, psychologically, And those who cling to one way of doing things out of pride or fear are simply writing their own obituaries in slow motion. Because what makes you valuable in a fast-moving world is not your ability to predict everything. It's your ability to respond to anything and respond not with panic, but with precision. Adaptability is not passive. It does not mean sitting back and accepting whatever happens. It means adjusting your strategy, not your standards. It means being relentless in your pursuit but fluid in your methods. It's knowing the difference between the hill you die on and the road you pivot on. Far too many people fail not because they lacked the ability, but because they refused to adjust the plan. They mistook loyalty to a method for loyalty to a mission, and in doing so, they preserved ego at the expense of evolution. That is how visionaries become relics, when they stop listening, stop observing, stop learning, and cling to what used to work instead of asking what will work now. There's a misconception that if you change course, it means you were wrong. That if you evolve your process, it means you weren't clear from the beginning. But that's not how greatness works. Edison didn't find the light bulb by repeating the same test. He pivoted thousands of times. Ford had to change manufacturing techniques as scale increased. Netflix started mailing DVDs and evolved into digital streaming, and then into content production. If they had stayed loyal to the original format, they would be forgotten. Adaptability is not an indicator of indecision, it is a mark of maturity, of an intelligent system responding to new data without emotional attachment. This also applies internally. The most successful people do not just evolve their strategies, they evolve their selves. Their identities are not rigid. They are fluid containers capable of holding whatever tools, skills, or qualities are required by the next level of their vision. They are not held hostage by labels or past decisions. They are willing to let go of who they used to be, how they used to operate, what used to work, even if it brought them success in the past, because they understand that new challenges demand new versions of them, and that growth is not a straight line but a series of redefinitions, rebirths, and reinventions. And this kind of adaptability cannot be forced from the outside. It has to be chosen. It has to be built into your character. It has to be trained into your nervous system so that you don't panic when the plan collapses, when the numbers drop, when the path you've been walking is suddenly blocked. Because in that moment when others freeze, break down, or retreat, you must become calm. You must become dangerous in your composure. You must access that deep internal power that says, this isn't the end, this is the adjustment. And then you move. You redesign. You rebuild. You reapproach. That is adaptability in its highest form, response without emotional regression. Adaptability also means knowing the difference between your tools and your truths. Tools change. Platforms shift. Strategies get replaced. But truth, your values, your standards, your mission, remains constant. If you know what you're here to do, the medium becomes secondary. If you know what you stand for, you can communicate it in any format, in any era, in any context. This is why clarity and adaptability must coexist. Without clarity, you'll adapt too easily, too quickly, losing your shape and diluting your impact. Without adaptability, you'll stagnate, resisting change out of stubbornness, and your relevance will evaporate. But with both, with deep inner clarity and high outer flexibility, you become indestructible. You can move through chaos like water, reshaping around obstacles without losing momentum. So how do you develop adaptability as a skill rather than a reaction? First, you must detach from the fantasy of control. You will not control the market. You will not control other people's opinions. You will not control the exact timeline of your success. What you can control is how quickly you learn, how quickly you execute the pivot, how intelligently you gather feedback and implement it. The adaptable mind is a curious mind, not just willing to evolve, but eager to, hungry for data, obsessed with growth, willing to be wrong, not because being wrong feels good, but because being wrong is the fastest route to being right next time. Second, you must be willing to release your attachment to outcomes. This doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means understanding that your job is execution and the universe's job is response. You control your input. You control your adjustments. You don't control the applause, the response time, or the shape the result will take. And if you can learn to love the game itself, the process, the evolution, the building and breaking and rebuilding, then you become immune to disappointment, because you're no longer playing just to win, you're playing to grow. That's the shift. That's where true adaptability becomes power. And third, surround yourself with environments that encourage evolution. Surround yourself with minds that challenge you, not echo chambers that validate your stagnation. Get in the room with people who are not impressed by what you've done, only interested in what you're becoming. Iron sharpens iron, not comfort. Your adaptability will atrophy in comfort. It will sharpen in challenge. You need pressure. You need dynamic input. You need to be forced to reconfigure your thinking under fire. That is the forge. And if you stay in it long enough, you become unbreakable. Because in the end, those who rise are not those who had the best plan. It's those who kept moving when the plan broke. It's those who weren't married to method, only to mission. Those who could reinvent themselves at every level. Those who could evolve faster than the problem could escalate. Those who saw every setback not as a wall, but as a signal to shift. Those who understood that adaptability is not survival. It is supremacy. The ability to navigate any terrain, adjust any system, respond to any force, and still advance. Chapter 10. Resilience is the fire that never dies. Resilience is not about pretending everything is fine. It is not smiling through the wreckage or numbing yourself to pain so you can carry on like nothing ever hit you. True resilience is something far deeper, far more sacred, and far more demanding than simply bouncing back. Resilience is the internal decision, renewed daily, sometimes hourly, that you will not allow external chaos to permanently alter your internal compass. It is the fire that remains lit no matter how violent the storm, the core that remains steady even as everything on the surface is torn apart. It is not loud. It is not glamorous. It is often invisible to the outside world. But it is what separates those who are merely touched by adversity from those who are transformed by it. You cannot train for resilience by reading about it. It is not intellectual. It is experiential. You learn resilience in the dark, in the silence, in the aftermath. You develop it when everything falls apart and you still get up. Not because you feel ready, not because someone told you to, but because something deeper than motivation, something more primal, insists that your story is not allowed to end here. Resilience is the voice that says, one more step. When your body is broken, your mind is screaming, and nothing in your circumstances gives you a reason to continue. It is the unshakable belief that what you're moving toward is still worth it, even if it costs everything. Everyone admires resilience when it's wrapped in success. They cheer for the comeback story, for the one who rose again, for the triumph after the tragedy. But what they don't see, what they don't want to see, is the loneliness of the in-between. The sleepless nights. The private losses. The haunting self-doubt. The rejections that come not once, but repeatedly. The quiet war between quitting and continuing, where no one is watching and no one would blame you for walking away. This is the real arena. This is where resilience is forged, in the silence after a failure so personal that it robs you of language, and the only thing left is your decision to not break. We live in a world that glorifies ease, and that is precisely why resilience is rare. We've been conditioned to believe that discomfort is to be avoided, that if something is hard it must not be meant for us, that failure is shameful instead of essential. And so people retreat. They hide. They tell themselves stories to explain why things didn't work out, and those stories calcify into belief systems, which eventually become their identity. But you are not here to become another casualty of that narrative. You are not here to let hardship rewire you into a version of yourself that moves through life cautiously, half-heartedly, bracing for pain instead of moving through it. Because pain is not the enemy. Pain is the price of progress. Pain is the tax you pay for pursuing anything of depth, of meaning, of greatness. And resilience is your ability to carry that pain with dignity, not because it's easy, but because you understand the value of it. Every scar becomes a symbol. Every wound becomes a map. Every failure, if you stay with it long enough, becomes instruction. Not just about what to do next time, but about who you really are underneath the surface of all your ambitions and goals and plans. Resilience shows you the unpolished, unfiltered, undistracted version of yourself, the one who still stands when the identity you built on success, applause, and image has been stripped away. And here's the hardest truth: you will be tested more than once. Life doesn't send a single hardship and then let you walk away wise and free. It will test your resilience again and again, sometimes with loss, sometimes with betrayal, sometimes with failure that feels personal. And each time, you'll face the same choice: give in to the narrative of defeat, or let the pain deepen your power. Those who rise do not rise because they are immune to the impact. They rise because they've learned how to absorb the blow without letting it define them. They rise because they are anchored to something greater than the circumstances of the moment. You do not rebuild resilience overnight. It is not a flip of a switch. It is rebuilt moment by moment. First by breathing through the breakdown, then by standing in the wreckage, then by taking the smallest next step forward, again and again, until momentum slowly returns. And as you do, something unexpected happens. You begin to trust yourself again. Not because everything is fixed, but because you've proven, once again, that you are still here. And that is the ultimate power. To still be standing. Still showing up. Still fighting. Still building. After everything tried to break you, and maybe even did for a time, but you refused to stay broken. That's the fire. That's what makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Because once you've been shattered and rebuilt yourself from the inside out, you stop fearing failure. You stop fearing rejection. You stop fearing risk. You stop needing to be perfect, liked, safe, or comfortable. You realize you've already survived the worst and come back wiser, stronger, sharper. That doesn't mean you enjoy suffering. It means you know how to use it, to refine yourself through it, to build through it, to find signal in the noise and meaning in the mess. And every time you do that, every time you survive another storm, you create a new internal reference point. You build a library of endurance, a record of resilience, a deep inner knowing that no matter what hits you next, it will not destroy you, it will develop you. So stop waiting for the storm to pass. Stop fantasizing about a life without obstacles. That life doesn't exist. And you wouldn't want it even if it did. Because without the struggle, there is no strength. Without the adversity, there is no insight. Without the pain, there is no depth. You are being shaped in ways you can't fully see yet, prepared for responsibilities, challenges, and opportunities that would crush the person you were a year ago. This version of you is being carved in fire. And when you emerge, not if, when, you won't just be better. You'll be undeniable. Because resilience isn't about avoiding the fall, it's about rising every single time, with more wisdom, more clarity, and more conviction than before. That is how the unbreakable are made. That is how your legacy is built. Not in the absence of struggle, but because of it. Chapter 11. The Infinite Power of Learning. There comes a moment in every journey, whether personal, professional, creative, or spiritual, when the path ahead becomes too unfamiliar, too complex, or too demanding for past knowledge to carry you forward. It's in that moment that people separate into two categories: those who retreat to what they know and those who evolve into what they need to become. And the ones who evolve, the ones who rise, expand, innovate, and transcend, are not always the most naturally gifted or best resourced. They are the ones who have internalized a foundational truth. The willingness to learn is more powerful than the illusion of knowing. Learning is not something that ends when formal education ends. In fact, the day you graduate, whether from high school, college, or some milestone in life, is not the conclusion of your education, it's the beginning of the real kind. The kind that doesn't come from curriculum or structured instruction, but from the chaos of experience, from the necessity of adaptation, from the relentless pressure to solve problems you've never seen before with tools you haven't yet mastered. Learning in the real world is not passive. It's not about memorizing facts or collecting degrees to decorate your ego. It is about transformation. It is about moving through life with eyes open, ears open, ego silent, and mind ready to absorb, question, unlearn, and reframe. One of the greatest tragedies is that most people stop learning because they mistake information for knowledge. They consume content, endless streams of videos, podcasts, posts, and books, and they feel a momentary rush of insight, but they never turn those insights into practice. Real learning, transformative learning, doesn't happen until what you've discovered rewires the way you act. Until your new understanding begins to shape your decision-making, your language, your systems, your leadership, your relationships, your habits. If the things you claim to know aren't influencing how you live, then what you have isn't knowledge, it's entertainment. To learn in this way requires humility. It requires the courage to be a beginner again, even when you're accomplished, even when people look to you as an expert, even when admitting that you don't know feels like vulnerability. But that humility is the gateway to mastery. Every person who reached the top of their domain, every innovator, thinker, athlete, scientist, creator, builder, began with the mindset of a student and never left it. Einstein kept notebooks filled with scribbles and open questions well into his most accomplished years. Da Vinci remained obsessed with studying anatomy, engineering, and nature, not because he lacked talent, but because he respected the process of learning more than the status of being called brilliant. When you choose to live in a learning mindset, you stop fearing failure because failure is no longer a verdict. It becomes data. It becomes feedback. You start to realize that every mistake contains a blueprint, every rejection offers a signal, every delay invites refinement. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What can this teach me that nothing else could?" That single shift, from victimhood to inquiry, is the difference between repeating old cycles and creating new futures. You also learn to ask better questions. Because learning isn't just about absorbing, it's about interrogating. It's about looking at your beliefs, your assumptions, your inherited ways of thinking and asking, where did this come from and does it still serve the life I want to live? Many people suffer not because of external barriers, but because they're operating on outdated scripts. Lessons absorbed from childhood, culture, failure, or fear, and they've never paused to examine them. But true learners, real builders, real leaders, dissect those scripts, challenge them, and consciously install better frameworks. They don't let outdated programming define their future. And here's the paradox. The more you learn, the more aware you become of how much you don't know. But instead of being overwhelmed by that awareness, the elite learner uses it as fuel. Because when you truly internalize how vast the universe of potential is, you stop being threatened by other people's greatness. You stop needing to prove your superiority in every room you walk into. You realize that everyone, regardless of background, skill level, or experience, has something to teach you if you're paying attention. That's the power of staying teachable. You remain a dynamic system. You grow faster. You recover faster. You adapt faster. And most of all, you avoid the most fatal mistake of all, thinking you've arrived. Because the second you believe you've figured it all out, you've closed the door on growth. That's the moment your development plateaus. That's the beginning of intellectual decay. The marketplace doesn't care what you used to know. Life doesn't reward the credentials you earned 10 years ago. Reality rewards relevance. Relevance is the product of ongoing learning. And ongoing learning is a choice. It's a muscle. You either train it or lose it. This also means confronting the fear that comes with entering new territory. Every time you stretch into a new skill, a new role, a new level of responsibility, there will be discomfort. There will be incompetence. There will be moments where you look and feel like an amateur. This is where most people retreat, because the ego doesn't like looking foolish. But if you're willing to endure that awkward stage, the vulnerable stretch between not knowing and mastery, you will eventually outpace those who stayed in their comfort zones, clinging to what they already know for fear of starting something new. So train yourself to lean into learning. Make it part of your identity. Schedule it like your most important meeting. Track it like your most vital metric. Audit your inputs. Ask yourself, am I consuming things that stretch me or things that confirm what I already believe? Create systems to capture insights, notebooks, mind maps, summaries, and review them regularly. Put what you learn into motion immediately, because unused knowledge expires. Share it. Teach it. Apply it. Embed it into your behavior. And above all, never let the appearance of success replace the urgency of growth. The greatest danger is not failure, it's stagnation wrapped in comfort. You must remain hungry for evolution. Not obsessed with outcomes, but addicted to becoming more capable, more useful, more refined. That is what it means to be a true learner. Not someone who knows more than others, but someone who becomes more than they were yesterday. Because learning is not just a strategy. It is a lifestyle, a weapon, a force multiplier. And once you embrace it fully, you become unstoppable, not because you have all the answers, but because you are unafraid to ask better questions, unafraid to seek new knowledge, and unafraid to grow through what others run from. Chapter 12. The Climax of Becoming. There is a point in every journey when you no longer move out of desperation, no longer act out of fear, and no longer pursue goals just to prove something to the world. You begin to move, instead, with a deeper rhythm, a rhythm that comes not from urgency, but from alignment. That is the climax of becoming. It is not a single event or a sudden explosion of success. It is a silent internal shift, almost imperceptible at first, where your effort is no longer driven by deficiency but by identity. You are no longer trying to escape your past, you are simply becoming who you were always meant to be, and nothing, not rejection, not delay, not uncertainty, can pull you out of that process, because you now belong to it. Becoming is not the result of one breakthrough. It is the culmination of every unseen choice. The early mornings no one applauded, the nights you stayed late not for validation but for excellence, the conversations you had with yourself when no one else understood what you were building. It is every single moment you wanted to quit but didn't, not because it was easy to keep going, but because you had made a promise to yourself that your life would not be built on convenience. It is the price paid in silence, the growth earned in solitude, the mastery forged in repetition. And now, everything starts to converge, not perfectly, not without resistance, but with unmistakable momentum. At this stage, your relationship with pain changes. You stop resisting it. You start recognizing it as the signal of proximity. The closer you are to your next evolution, the more friction you will feel. That friction is not a warning sign to retreat, but confirmation that you are rubbing up against the edges of who you were and beginning to stretch into who you are becoming. The discomfort is sacred. It means you are alive, engaged, and growing in real time. And while others are chasing ease and chasing shortcuts, you are here, holding your ground, refining your craft, honoring the process with the patience of a sculptor who understands that greatness is not assembled, it is chiseled. This is also when clarity begins to replace chaos. Where confusion once lived, now there is certainty, not because you've figured everything out, but because you've stopped needing to. You've made peace with the unknown. You've stopped demanding guarantees. You now understand that the only certainty that matters is your commitment to the path, your willingness to keep learning, your refusal to break under pressure. The fog hasn't necessarily lifted, but you now walk through it with the posture of someone who trusts their stride. You also begin to see your power differently. When you started this journey, power may have looked like control, over outcomes, over people, over circumstances. But now you know that true power is self-governance. It's the ability to stay calm when others panic, to hold vision when others see only crisis, to move with integrity when shortcuts are available, to choose depth over noise, substance over appearance. Power is now internal. It is not performance. It is the unshakable awareness that you no longer have anything to prove, only something to build, something to serve, something to give. That is what changes everything. When your pursuit stops being about your ego and starts being about your contribution, you begin to realize that all of this, the work, the struggle, the learning, the discipline, the failures, the reinventions, wasn't just about creating a life you could be proud of. It was about becoming a person the world needed. Not in the superficial way that gets likes or followers or headlines, but in the foundational way that leaves people better than you found them. That heals. That elevates. That sharpens. You start to feel it in the way people respond to your presence. Not because you're louder, but because your presence means something now. It's earned. It's grounded. It's real. And this is where legacy begins. Not when you retire. Not when you're recognized. Not when the awards arrive. But when you realize that your life has become a message, that who you are is more powerful than anything you ever post or say or write. Your choices, your standards, your ability to remain consistent when everything around you shifts, that becomes the impact. You become an example not because you declared yourself one, but because others see the way you live and feel something awaken in themselves. That is the climax of becoming. It's not a peak, it's a platform. A new level of existence where your life begins to ripple outward, carrying with it the energy of every storm you've endured, every truth you've uncovered, and every wall you've torn down just to find out what still stands when everything else is stripped away. And when you look back, really look back, you realize that it was never about one breakthrough moment. It was always about the pattern, the consistency, the refusal to betray yourself when things got hard, the standards you set and actually lived by, the silence you honored when the noise got loud, the boundaries you enforced, the grace you extended, the hours you worked when no one clapped, the humility you kept when success came, the discipline you maintained when comfort tempted you to stop, and the faith, the quiet, unshakable faith, that something inside you was worth building, even when no one saw it but you. And so here you are, not finished, not perfect, not at some final mountaintop, but transformed. And you know now that this process never truly ends. Because to become is not a goal, it is a way of life. You never arrive. You just continue. Stronger, wiser, deeper, clearer, hungrier not for praise, but for purpose. And as the world continues to spin, you do not spin with it, you stand. You build. You serve. You evolve. That is the real reward. Not applause. Not fame. Not even comfort. The reward is knowing, deep in your bones, that you did not waste your life. That you did not run from the call. That you did not sell your soul for safety. That you answered. That you built. That you became. And now, as the next chapter begins, whatever that may be, wherever it may take you, you will walk forward not just with goals and plans, but with gravity. The kind of gravity that cannot be manufactured. The kind that only comes when you've faced yourself fully and chosen to rise anyway. Because you have decoded your destiny. And now, nothing can stop you, not because it will be easy, but because you have become the kind of person who doesn't stop. You are the storm. You are the stillness. You are the force. And you are only getting started.